I call this Board of Education, Teaching and Learning, Tuesday, April 10th, 2018, 6:30. Roll call is myself, Mark Johnson, Evelyn Gleason, and Dr. Williams. Communications, old business, none, new business. The 2017-18 calendar abatement.
Okay, so for our first item underneath your agenda is the calendar abatement. So really, this is the calendar as it stands right now on our website. The June 4th is actually the last day of school if we used emergency days. So since we didn't use any, we're going to abate these 5 days. So taking off the 4th, the 1st, and then the last week of May puts our last day of school as May 25th.
Wow. That's before Memorial Day. Wow.
Yeah.
How many days of school we go?
So we go, student attendance is 174. Yeah, this is your copy. So we have 174 student days. We always build in 5 emergency days every year.
Okay.
We have 4 institute days, and we're allowed 2 parent-teacher conferences for a total of 185. And then when we take away these 5 days, our school year is actually 180 days. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions, comments, reflections on that? Pretty straightforward. We'll take that to the board for approval.
Okay.
Next
we
week.
don't get any snow.
Evelyn!
It snowed yesterday, don't think
I
so.
know.
Oh, it did. It sure did.
Crazy.
All right. My second item on the agenda, I thought it's time that we take a look at ESSA in the new report card. So you have a mock-up. This is our version of the new report card. We started doing this, I'm going to minimize this one, before the state went to the new report card that they have now. Bill and the team and I worked on creating our own version of the report card. And so we're doing the same thing this year before this new report card rolls out in the fall, because we want each member of the organization to understand how we're going to be held accountable. So the state is moving away from labeling us based on one test score, and they're going to kind of a multiple measures approach. Okay, so that's what we're going to walk through today, is all those different measures.
Okay.
Okay, so
Remind me what ESSA stands for.
Every Student Succeeds Act. Yep.
Okay.
So it's the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. So NCLB is gone, and ESSA is now in its place.
Okay.
So the state's main goals, and there's a few precursors to this. So ESSA encompasses grades P, so pre-kindergarten all the way through high school. So I didn't necessarily put down the goals related to elementary because it doesn't apply to us. But in terms of high school, these are their goals. They expect 90% of our 9th graders to be on track to graduate with their cohort. So the one positive of ESSA is we no longer have the 100% because we know 100% is unrealistic. 90% is going to be a stretch for some of our students. 90% or more of our students graduate from high school ready for college and career, and we'll talk about what that means. All students are supported by highly prepared and effective teachers and school leaders. We certainly work on this through professional development, our new teacher induction, principal trainings, things of that nature. And every school offers a safe and healthy learning environment for all students. And that's something certainly we continue to address on a yearly basis. Some of this information comes out from our Illinois 5 Essentials survey. And then, for example, the work this year that Dr. Kendall brought in that outside agency to do an audit of our schools in terms of safety. So always trying to make sure that we're keeping that at the forefront. And then on a broader goal, by the year 2025, the state would like to see 60% or more of Illinoisans hold a high-quality degree or post-secondary credential. I don't know how they're going to track that piece of it, but I think the work that we're trying to do with our alternative education program and going down the path of certifications and industry credentials is certainly going to assist in helping us.
What do they consider a high-quality degree?
Don't know. You're going to find a lot of ESSA is still undefined and still a work in progress. So tonight I'm going to be able to explain parts that are clear, and I'll let you know where there's still work being done in discussion. So these are kind of those broad goals, so 90%. Now, I will tell you, I'm going to back up, there is an end goal, so it's not 90% by next year, it's 90% by 2032.
Oh.
Okay?
I'll
So,
be long gone.
hopefully not from the planet, just one from here. So, looking at your copy, I've kind of narrowed it down here. There's going to be two major components of our new report card. 75% of our grade, if you will, is going to come from academic indicators. Things like the SAT, the graduation rate, access, and the Illinois Science Assessment. And I'm going to go into detail in each of those. And then 25% are going to come from things called student success indicators. This is our chronic absenteeism, our freshmen on track, the climate survey, fine arts. There's one that's a little vague, and college and career readiness. There's a lot in that section that's still being defined. Okay. So as far as the time frame, this is a 15-year timeline. They've set it up in 3-year interim goals that will have benchmarks. So in 3 years, you need to hit this benchmark. And 3 years later, you have to hit this benchmark. And 3 years later, so in other words, by 2032, we need to meet 90% of those state goals. Or 90% of our students need to meet those state goals. So the benchmarks are set every 3 years until 90%. Evelyn, you were around when we had the PSAE and AYP. Remember, it was 7.5% each year, and then it went up. We're back to the same thing.
So your success is really going to be determined on those grammar schools.
That's part,
Always
absolutely.
has been.
Right, it always
Right.
has been. But there's still a lot, even within our control, that we can continue to refine. Yes, we always have to take kids from where they come from and where they start, and our job is to grow them as far as they possibly can be. And that's where that 90%, for some of our students, it's still going to be a lofty goal.
Because
it's
freshmen on track, you know, you get a big chunk of them that come in that aren't reading at a 9th grade level. That sets you back right there.
right. And so the 90% is not just for all kids. So there's going to be a benchmark for all students, and then all of our subgroups. All of our ethnic groups are going to have a benchmark. Our IEP students, our special ed students, our English learners. They're actually thinking about tracking migrant and setting up a benchmark for migrant students. So we're kind of back to that
How do they even identify that?
That's a great question. Yeah. So let's go through the academic side. So the first one that's there is SAT. SAT for the first year is going to count as 20%. Okay. And this is according to ISBE's benchmarks. So ISBE actually increased the benchmarks. They did not go with College Board benchmarks because they felt they weren't rigorous enough. So we have to get a 540 on the reading and writing section, and we have to get a 540 on math. So the data that you see there, left to right, the first block of bar graphs represents reading, the middle block represents math, and then the far block represents percentage of students that met both reading and math benchmarks. Does that make sense?
What are the different, I see.
Yeah, so then
the
we're
different schools.
Yep, we have them
Okay.
organized by school, with the last bar being the state of Illinois. So in reading, as a district, 27% of our students met the 540 in reading, 40% of Illinois students met in reading. In math, 22% of our students met in the 540, 37% of the state, 24% of our students met both benchmarks, and 39% of the state met both benchmarks. Now you're going to see a little bit later on when we get into college and career readiness, we actually have a higher percentage of students meeting College Board's benchmarks, which are actually 480 and 530. Okay, so while we're going to get dinged on this first indicator, our students will still have the opportunity to be considered college and career ready later under the student success indicators.
And these scores are, this was the first year of SAT,
Correct.
Yeah, okay. That's important.
Yes.
That should say that on your side.
Well, I'm going to switch over to a different presentation because I actually just put this together. Debbie was looking for this information, so let me show you this. So here's what puts them side by side. College Board's benchmark is 480. The state is 540. Skip this for right now and come down here. So if we went by College Board's expectation, 48% of our students actually met. Because the state increased it, we dropped down to 31. In math, 23% of our kids met College Board, 21% met according to the state. There's only a 10-point difference here, but there's a 60-point difference here. which is huge.
Yeah.
If we went with College Board, 22% of our students actually met both, as opposed to 17 at the state level. And then you can see it broken down. I mean, our schools got dinged across the board. Especially in the reading and the English.
Do you know why Debbie was asking about this?
Not sure. So when we compare ourselves to the state, now you have to be careful with this data because this data actually reflects the class of 2017. Our data reflects the class of 2018, so our current seniors. We don't have this information for 2018, so the reason why this is so much higher, the state didn't require the SAT in 2017. So this data reflects students who are your high flyers across the country and in the state of Illinois that are going to East Coast schools or West Coast schools because they require the SAT. Midwest colleges require ACT. I don't know if you knew that, Mark.
No, I did not.
Is that changing?
It is. Now that the state of Illinois is requiring the SAT, more schools in the Midwest are opening up SAT scores as well. All of them will always accept both, but traditionally the East and West Coast have always used SAT. So that's why this percentage is way higher. And even across the nation, only your best and brightest kids are taking the SAT. Not all states require all kids to take the SAT. Does that make sense?
Okay. I mean, this. In some points, I could honestly say it look discouraging, but then again, we're looking at only the top students taking it and now.
With this data, now all kids are taking it. And yeah, so it may seem discouraging up front. We have to remember this was the very first year we gave it. Today was actually the second time we've ever given the SAT.
Okay.
The amount of information we're getting back for the students in terms of feedback and where they need to improve is so much greater with this product than what we were ever giving from SAT. So or ACT, I keep blending the two. Let me show you. This is what I was pulling up earlier. So here's comparing our progress, old test, new test. So here's our data from the 2017 SAT. And if we take a look at, well, how did we do on our last ACT? Okay. So in ACT, you had to get a 22 in reading and an 18 in English. 28% of our students met in reading, 46% met in English. 48% of our kids met on SATs, reading and writing. If we go over to math, 26% here, we know math, we're struggling a little bit. 26% met ACT, 23% met SAT. What really is different, in order to be considered college and career ready under ACT, you had to hit 4 benchmarks: reading, English, math, and the one that's not up here is science. Only 13% of our kids met all 4. Here they only have to meet 2, and 22% of our kids met both. So we have a greater opportunity for students to hit both benchmarks under SAT than we do under ACT. So the conundrum right now, we just are hearing from the state of Illinois, the potential is school districts can choose whether to give ACT or SAT, because this is the last year of SAT.
What?
This is the last year of the original contract. It was a 3-year contract. Yeah.
So we're going.
The tests are significantly different.
Yes.
ACT and SAT.
Yes.
So that means the students will be able to choose which one they want.
No, the district, well, right now, this is what's going out there. Our position is we would rather have the SAT. We believe it's better for kids. The amount of, like I said, the amount of data we get back to help our students and help our teachers is way greater than what we ever saw from ACT. And the fact that we have a greater opportunity for students to hit the benchmarks under SAT than they do under ACT. So our position is, and a lot of the Chicago area schools are saying, stay with the ACT. Stay with the SAT. Sorry.
No problem.
Because it's a much better test.
Will they still continue? Because SAT, I don't know if it was the same with your son. When my kids took the ACT, they had to go to a special prep class, like at night.
Yes.
SAT is offering it all online, free, whenever you want it.
Yes.
Go get
Right.
it.
I remember I paid for
Is
those
that going to
classes.
stay?
If
Or
we stay with the SAT.
if we stay, we don't have to pay extra for that. Just comes.
Right, that's Khan Academy. That comes right with it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then it's a no-brainer.
Right. But that's what's out there right now, is the state's tinkering with allowing choice.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's because they don't want to make a decision. I really don't know.
Who is? I'm trying to think. If they just brought in a new president from out of state, I believe. The guy that used to, I can't think of his name now, he used to be a superintendent. He became chairman of ISB. And he's retired. Roger Reddy, he's retiring. So there's somebody, a new guy going in there, and I believe he's from out of state.
Mm.
I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow. And
What?
what is so frustrating, and then they put this up, and then the election will be next year, and this will be front page headline news. And how do you explain to them, this was this test, now it's that test, that's another test? How do you explain it to
Right.
people? You don't.
It's our frustration too, and constantly, we're always trying to push and help our teachers prepare to help prepare our kids, and every time we turn around, oh, that's out the window. Forget what you just did there. Let's start over and do this process, And
Is this true at the elementary level too? Are they giving a different test to coincide with SAT?
no, they're still doing Park,
They're still doing Park,
which I believe this year or next year is their last year of Park as well. So I don't know what they're going to be moving to, or if they're going to stay with.
Is Park like tied into ACT?
No, it's not aligned to either.
That makes a lot of sense
Right.
too.
That's unbelievable.
They do.
So
make
they have no
sense.
idea what they need to really. I don't know.
No, and so we've been tinkering with, do we move to the PSAT 8 as our placement test? So that at least then there's the buy-in from the elementary schools about this is what kids need to know and be able to understand coming into high school. We're tinkering with that. Of course, then it comes down to, finance. So, positive, it's 20% this year. The following year, it's only 15% of our grade. Whatever the state assessment is going to be. Again, I hope we stay with the SAT because I think it's good for kids and it makes the most sense and it's most aligned with our curriculum.
That decision is by Dr. Kendall, then, right?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. Right now, it's at the board, state board level in terms of this is what they're thinking about, but no decision has been made.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Graduation rate. Graduation rate is actually 50% of our grade. So half of the 75% is going to come from graduation rate. And graduation rate is made up of 3 types of graduation rate. And it's based upon, so the current freshmen this year, how many kids actually from this original cohort finish in 4 years, how many of the original cohort finish in 5, in addition to those kids that didn't finish in 4 get counted in 5, and then how many kids finished in 6. So I'm not 100% clear how they calculate the 5 and 6 year. There's a big flow chart, and I can't explain to you yet, and so I don't want to pretend that I can. So until I get a handle on 5 and 6 year, we'll just talk about the 4 years. So again, it's the kids that started as a freshman this year. Do they actually finish in 4 years? So 30% of the 50% is going to come from kids finishing in 4 years. 15% will come from those finishing in 5 and 5% from year 6. Evelyn, you look like you have a question.
I don't understand the numbers.
So right now, this is the percentage of our students at Bremen. 89% of our students graduate in 4 years from the original cohort.
So why does the top say, 50% of the score? Okay.
Yeah, 50% of the 75% will come from, so think about 50 points of our total 100 come from graduation rate.
Right.
So,
And isn't there, I remember arguing this during an election. Kids that move up, move away,
come in,
transfer.
That's where I don't have a handle on being
It's not a valid number.
That's where this formula comes into play. So you have to figure out how many kids left, how many kids came in, how many kids dropped out, how many are incarcerated, how many died, and you do this big mathematical formula to come up with the 4-year, the 5-year, and the 6-year. That's why I said I'm not 100% clear, so I can't explain it to you yet.
And
I'm still
I
trying to wrap my head around
find it hard, maybe I'm naive, I find it hard to believe that we actually have kids here who are here for 6 years,
Yes, well, don't.
who aren't special ed.
We do have a few. We do have a few. And now it's to our advantage to have kids finish rather than dropping out because we actually get dinged for dropouts as opposed to helping them finish.
Who is going to stay here as a 20-year-old? I mean,
Right.
seriously.
Well, once in a rare case, they may come through Delta for one semester.
Right.
There are some exceptions. There's not a lot, but most of these are your special ed that stay with us.
By law.
Yes.
This is
I'm right there with
insanity,
you.
Corey.
I'm right there with you.
You have to keep them till their 23rd
Yes.
birthday.
Yes.
Have to.
23rd.
23rd birthday.
The day
if they're
before.
special ed.
Yep.
That's a lot of money. Trying to.
And in a lot of cases, it's not education. It's care.
Job skill training, functional skills. Yeah.
But am I correct? We have kids who are, for lack of a better word, institutionalized.
They would get a certificate of attendance. They wouldn't fall in here. I don't believe they count against us.
Okay.
It's the ones that go to transition services that end up earning a diploma. They delay the diploma for the 2 years, and then they'll show up in.
And that's the
6
program we currently have with
It's
South
Suburban.
Suburban,
Yes.
which is
It's
good
great
for kids.
Exactly.
So let's take it and ding us for, oh my God, this is insanity.
the good news is at least we're right with the state, in terms of
Yeah.
the 5-year, 6-year. So where we have to really focus is getting kids graduating in 4. So what else on that sheet has a direct impact on graduation rate? I mentioned it earlier in a student success indicator, somewhere at the bottom.
Chronic absenteeism.
That's in 2.
Well, for sure, because if kids aren't here, they're not learning.
Yeah.
But the freshmen on track,
Right.
making sure our freshmen are successful has a huge impact on whether they graduate in 4 years or not. So we'll get to that one.
So, I mean, just let me ask this bluntly. If you look at the freshmen on track, Hillcrest is at 62 and
Yeah.
63%.
Yeah.
How much of that has to do with where they are when they come to us? I mean, it's got to be a factor,
I'm sure that it is
Yeah, I
a
agree.
factor.
but not
No.
the only one.
No. We'll dive into that one a little bit deeper
Okay.
when we get to that point. Access. Access makes up 5%. So this is the state required assessment we have to give our English learners. Okay, so these are students that came to us that are learning English maybe for the first time, or they've been in the country for a few years, but their English proficiency is not where it needs to be according to the state. So we actually, every student that comes into our district, we actually give them what's called a home language survey, and it's basically 2 questions. Do you speak a language other than English? And if they say yes, we flag them. And then the second question is, does anyone in your home speak a language other than English? So if they say yes to either one of those, we have to give them a test. It's called a screener to identify where their English proficiency is at. Depending upon where it's at, we offer them English language services, meaning they're either in self-contained English classes where they have translators working with them. So think of it as they're learning English in addition to learning math, but they have to learn English to understand math, and they have to learn English to understand science, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got the 2 programs, one at Oak Forest, which is for students at Hillcrest and Tinley and Oak Forest. They have a self-contained EL program over there. We have, at any point in time, maybe upwards of 16 different languages going on at Oak Forest. And at Bremen, we have a self-contained bilingual program because the majority language there is Spanish.
Spanish, right.
Okay. So whether a student receives services or does not receive services, if they don't show proficiency, they are tested every single year until they proficiency out. The max score is a 6, and they have to get a 4.8. And the test is made up of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, all in English. Okay. So what you're seeing here is the percentage of our students that showed proficiency last school year.
Is that relative in any way to the number of students that took the test, or is it just?
That's a really good question. I will get that data for you. Because that is a little bit, 5% seems like it's really low, but you're right.
Yeah.
How many students actually took the test?
Now, I know it's maybe cruel, but are we teaching undocumented students too?
We may be, and I can't tell you that for certain because we don't ask about their paperwork beyond showing residency. So there could very well be. And then in that case, they would be considered one of those migrant students, and we are required to teach them. And at the end of the day, it's still the right thing to do to help those students.
Yeah.
So that's 5% of our score. The last one, the Illinois Science Assessment, we just kind of refer to this as the science test. This is always a fun one. This will be, next year it counts as 0%, but the following school year will count as 5%. So SAT will go from 20 to 15, and the science assessment will come on the books as 5%. This test is given to all first-time biology students in the junior year, whether they're in self-contained foundations of biology or advanced placement biology or somewhere in between. They're tested in science. It's an online test. It's 60 minutes, and the topic is ecology. The wonderful thing about this, which actually happens, we teach ecology towards the end of the fourth quarter, so that's when we're giving the test next week to our students. But the beautiful thing about this, our data here, the school year 16, so this was 2 years ago. These kids are already gone. We just got this data in December of this school year.
How helpful.
We just got this data, I think, February. We get no feedback. We have no idea the structure of the test. We have no idea what the strengths and weaknesses of our students are in biology. We just get a score.
And why is it only biology?
That's what they chose as their flagship course. In school year 16, we actually beat the state. 45% of our students met proficiency. Proficiency is a 307. The highest score you can get is a 400. The district score was actually a 303. The state was a 300. This year, this current senior class, 34% met and 40% of the state met. It could have just been 2 years ago we had a really strong science class, and this graduating class maybe not so much, and we'll see where this year's biology students are. Another example of one that's very frustrating because we have absolutely no idea how our kids are doing. So that's the science assessment. The state was required to put in a science assessment because they were supposed to under PSAE forever, and they never did. And they finally got their hand slapped by the federal government for not giving a science assessment. So they grabbed this test from Washington, D.C. and implemented it 2 years ago. Questions about our academic indicators?
When we talk about the state, we're talking about the State Board of Education.
Yes.
Which is a politically appointed board.
Man, when we look at it, all the schools dropped several points.
Different tests.
Was it a
Well, we don't know. We don't get anything. And we get no item analysis, we get no test example, nothing. So the only thing that I can go on is the fact that one class probably was stronger than the other. And we used to see this, remember in ACT with ebb and flow, 1 year the class was stronger in
Every
reading.
class has its own personality,
Yes.
its own strength, its own, just like your kids.
Okay.
Yes.
My older son is horrible in math and science. My younger one,
Brilliant.
blew it up.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's the only thing I can attribute here. Okay. So those 4 items make up our academic indicators. Again, think about it as 100 points, 75 points coming from those 4 areas. Okay. Moving on to student success indicators. So chronic absenteeism accounts for 7.5%, so 7.5 points will come from this. Chronic absenteeism is defined as the percentage of students that have missed more than 10% of total attendance days. So let's think about this. How many days do we have in our calendar year?
174.
For student attendance, and you tack on everything else, it's 180, right? So 10% of that is 18. A student is allowed to miss 18 days. It's excused and unexcused counted. So as soon as they hit day 19, they're considered chronic absent, and they would end up in this percentage. So this is one area we can monitor on a daily basis, weekly basis, to see who our chronic absentee students are and try to, nip it in the bud where we can. The good news is we're well below the Illinois average of 11% chronic absenteeism. And as a district, last year we were at 2.5%. As of February 6th, when I pulled this data, we were at 2.1%.
But there again, look at the difference in this from school to school, from year to year.
Yes. Freshmen on track counts as 6.25%. So this is another one where we have tremendous impact and can monitor and hopefully help reduce if we're paying attention and catching it. And as I mentioned, this directly impacts graduation rates. So freshmen on track is defined as students must pass 5 classes. So they take 6 in a year. They have to pass 5, and they can only earn 1 E in a semester core class. Okay? So if I have, let's just say, English, math, social studies, science, let's say PE. I'm a freshman. I have health and then PE. I may have an elective in there, but let's just talk about those 5. If I fail a semester of science and a semester of social studies, I'm no longer on track. Even if I take an elective, even if I have 6 classes, the fact that I failed 1 course each semester, I'm already off track. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is one where we can absolutely monitor and track.
So we're saying Hillcrest got 62% like that?
Yeah.
And then they went up the next year to 63.4.
Yeah. A lot of it is educating the staff. A lot of it is having conversations about grading practices. So one of the things I talk to the APs and the principals about is pull your numbers at the end of the first semester. See how many students are in that 55 to 59 range that are close but maybe failed a test or didn't do some homework assignments. And are we having conversations with the teachers about putting the students on an academic contract? Whereas if they pass second semester, they can go over and override first semester and give them a passing grade. Because we're not held accountable to freshmen on track until the end of the school year. So they don't look at it at each semester, they look at it at the end. So we can always go back and adjust a first semester grade if the student's on an academic contract. So we're trying to have those conversations to help students be successful.
And how many of those failures are based on incomplete homework?
That's a great question. We don't know.
Sure, a lot.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're trying to have that conversation about, are we considering weighting grades instead of total points? There's always that perception of, I'll just give them more and more assignments because that'll help them earn more points, but it actually is contradictory to that and actually digs them a bigger hole.
A lot of ways to look at that one.
Yes. Climate survey will count as 5%. The climate survey is that Illinois 5 Essentials survey that we give every other year. And when I originally put this report card together, we thought it had to do with the label that the state, after they collected all their survey data and combed through it, they gave you this label of organized, partially organized, not organized, and I forget what the bottom one is. So originally we thought it had something to do with the label, but after I went to an ISB workshop a couple of weeks ago, what I found out is it's actually, all it is going to be the monitoring the percentage of students that actually take the survey. So all we need to shoot for is 90% of our students taking the survey, and we'll get our 5 points.
So what does not yet organized mean?
That's where they took, remember, teachers took the survey, students took the survey, and parents took the survey. And based upon the responses, they collated all that information and said, okay, when we look at all the data and we look at all the participants' responses based upon what they said, you're either organized in curriculum instruction, or you're partially organized in leadership. There's like 5 different areas. And so you got a grade for each of those areas, and then those were added together to give you an overall label. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. But at this point, we're finding out it really doesn't matter what the students say, they just have to take the survey.
And what about the parents and the teachers?
We still want them to, but it's not going to count for us in our grade. It counts for us in terms of getting data, but it's not going to get us points on the report card. I don't get it. That's one I really don't get.
And I mean, if you put this out, when I read this, my first thought was not yet organized. They didn't have their stuff together. They didn't.
Right.
They couldn't put the survey out there.
No.
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Right.
But
No.
what do you think it sounds like, Mark?
Exactly what you said.
Yeah, no, it has to do with the feedback on what everybody said.
Not yet organized. What a label.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, fine arts. Here's another nebulous one. Right now it's counting at 0%. A year from now, it will be anywhere from 0 to 5% of our grade, and then chronic absenteeism will be decreased whatever the difference is. Okay. And all they're tracking here is the enrollment in fine arts. I have no idea what the target is. I don't know if they're expecting 90% of our kids to be enrolled in fine arts. We don't know. We just know that they're going to track the enrollment. So right now, this is our enrollment of kids in fine arts, and we're looking at about 30% at each building, which is probably appropriate. So I don't know what more they're going to be looking at. So that's one that's still not clearly defined. The last one, college and career readiness. This is where a lot of the meat is. This is going to count for 6.25%. Students are going to be able to earn college and career readiness through one of 3 options. They can be deemed a distinguished scholar, or there's option 1 or option 2. All 3 options have a GPA component. All 3 options require juniors and seniors to have 95% attendance both years, and they have to meet academic and career indicators. So this is actually on the back of that report card, and we'll walk through each one. For the distinguished scholar, they have to have a 3.75 out of a 4, a 1400 on the SAT, at least 1 ELA and 1 math indicator, 3 college and career ready indicators between their junior and senior year, and 95% attendance, as I mentioned. This is going to be a very small percentage of our population because they have to hit all of this. Option 1, students can have a 2.8 GPA, 95% attendance, and this is one area where there's a lot of vagueness. A college and career pathway endorsement under the POWER Act. We don't know what this is. We don't know which endorsements are going to be endorsed by the state of Illinois. But there are some competencies under development in the areas of finance and business, health, information tech, and manufacturing and engineering. So more information to come in this particular one. Most of our students are probably, we're going to shoot for option 2, which is a 2.8 GPA, at least 1 ELA and 1 math indicator, or algebra 2 at any point in time, 3 college or career ready indicators, 95% attendance, and then by the end of their sophomore year, they have to identify a career interest. So this is where our product like career cruising will come into play as we're exposing students through career exploration. We're also looking at Naviance, which is another software package that has a little more bells and whistles. On the back end, it actually will produce student transcripts and connect to colleges, and it's really, really nice. So I think we might be leaning more towards Naviance. Either way, both softwares are going to help assist us in collecting all of this data. So by the end of the sophomore year, that's one of the things they have to declare a career area of interest.
So they have to have all 4 of those.
Yep.
So as soon as they're under 95% attendance,
They're no longer college and career ready.
that's ridiculous. So we're talking about 9 days absence in 2 years. I think that's absurd. I mean, I understand if you're not here, you're not learning. I certainly endorse attendance, but
Well, and I think they're trying to help instill in students, if you're also not at work, you have the potential of
Exactly.
losing your job, and so I get it,
But again, attendance is something that is not exactly, we can preach and moan and gripe, but that's not going to get them through the front door.
Right.
It's not our thing, and yet we're held accountable for it.
We certainly, that's where we have to educate our families, and I'm even thinking, over at Bremen with our Hispanic population, a lot of them go back to Mexico for vacation and, don't come back for a couple weeks, and, so we have to stress that, and we understand it. It's going to be a challenge.
Not only that, I mean, people nowadays, I see it all, they think nothing of, we're going to Disney World for a week.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And too bad. Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So if we look at our academic indicators, so let me just back up. So again, all of our kids have to earn at least 1 English and 1 math academic indicator, so I'm going to show you that list, and then 3 career indicators. So the academic indicators, they can get any one of these. So this is where we got dinged earlier in SAT for not hitting ISB's benchmarks in reading and math. But if our students meet the 480 and the 530, they are considered college and career ready. So if they hit those benchmarks, they already have that met. If they didn't meet those benchmarks, they could, we don't actually have dual credit English, but if they were taking an AP class and got an A, B, or C, they'd be considered college and career ready. If they passed the exam with a 3 or better, they would get that indicator. We're looking at transitional English and transitional math, not for next year, but for the following school year. This is basically, think about 097, 099. This is your remedial college English and college math. We're looking to pilot this in our alternative education program, second semester, and then bring it into the day school for students that aren't college and career ready at that point. So rather than taking a different math class senior year, they would enroll in one of these classes, or English. They would enroll in the 099, 097. Okay. Questions about those? Okay, the last section is where there's still a lot of gray area. These are the career indicators. So students have to get 3 career indicators between their junior and senior year. First one is workplace experience. This is not the work program per se. It could be a student going and doing an internship or job shadowing with companies, and they just have to acquire 60 hours. It could be paid or unpaid. Okay. Industry credential. We have no idea what the state is going to accept as industry credential. There's a lot of certificates and credentials that we're publicizing right now, and we know that they're good for kids, but they're not necessarily industry credentials. For example, EverFi, that the students take in personal finance, is not really an industry credential, as opposed to OSHA certification, ServSafe, which is your sanitation for food service. Those are industry credentials. Those will count. So at this point, we don't know which ones will.
The ServSafe, if you work at McDonald's, if you work in the snack bar at the Park District, you have to have it.
Absolutely.
So I mean, think of all the kids that are working in those kinds of jobs.
Yes.
That's an easy one.
Yes. Difficult to obtain, but we're already offering it, and certainly the students can.
It's online. It's not that difficult.
No.
I mean, it's an online course.
Yes.
Pretty.
So beyond those 2, we don't know what else the state will allow. Military service, so this includes ROTC, so we are exploring ROTC as a possibility. Won't be for next year, but potentially the following year. Dual credit career pathway course, this is another one. We don't really know what that means outside of, making sure that the students are, if they're in a business track, that they're doing personal finance, accounting, entrepreneurship, and that's a pathway. Again, we're not 100% clear, but that's what we're thinking. Same thing with the completion of program of study. We don't really know what that means at this point.
Would that engineering class count as a dual credit pathway, maybe?
I think, but there has to be consecutive. So if students takes 1 and 2, then probably, but again, we're guessing. But we know that is a dual credit course. Attaining and maintaining consistent employment for a minimum of 12 months. So this is 480 hours. So if a student happens to have a job all year long, and they've maintained it for 12 months, they would be considered career ready. How would they prove this? They could prove this through pay stubs, a letter from the employer, something like that. Same thing with consecutive summer employment. So this is one that's actually going to be a little tricky because keep in mind you have to do this between your junior and senior year. So if I'm a junior,
Consecutive.
yep, I'm working this summer. Now it's my senior year. I've already graduated, but I'm still working in the summer. Those are 2 consecutive summer employments. All I would need is a letter from my employer saying that I'm staying on, and I'd be considered career ready. And that's 120 hours. 25 hours of community service. So this is another area where, again, we don't mandate community service as a graduation requirement because our students give freely. Dr. Kendall believes that, he went through that with 230, and he believes, that's not an avenue we want to go down because our students do community service and we don't necessarily have to force them to do it.
And you don't have anybody chasing them around. I mean, I can't
Yes.
tell you how many kids showed up at my door at the park
Yep,
from 2:30
asking for the letters.
Because they were going to graduate if
Mhm.
they didn't do ABC in a month
Yes,
that they've had 4 years to do.
yes, yep. And ISB is very clear, like you cannot do community service with family members. I mean, they're very strict on this one because people have played that game.
Mhm.
But we have to figure out some way of collecting that information. That's where that career cruising Naviance can come in and help log. And then the last one, 2 or more organized co-curricular activities. So if I'm a 2-sport athlete, I can only count 1 sport towards this. I'd have to be in some other co-curricular. Now, it can't be extracurricular, so the difference between the two. A co-curricular is a competitive activity like Scholastic Bowl, Mathletes, group inter, speech, things like that. Extracurricular would be Gamers Club and Photography Club because it's not competitive. So I can do 1 co-curricular and 1 extracurricular, but I can't have 2 extracurriculars. So this section is going to be the hardest for us to kind of track. But we're already starting to put some systems in place. Let me jump over to the warehouse really quick.
And this is 6.25%
Yes.
of student success.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we're trying to get our PPS staff to wrap their head around, I'm just going to put up 1 counselor here. We actually built a counselor page. Because we're of the essence, everybody in the organization needs to understand how we're being held accountable, but not one person is responsible for all of this. We want to divvy it up and say, okay, where does it make the most sense for somebody to track? Deans and counselors certainly should be looking at chronic absenteeism. APs for teaching and learning and supervisors should be looking at freshmen on track. So we're trying to help divvy up because it's overwhelming to try to track all this stuff at once. So we built this counselor page. So counselors at any point in time can pull up in the warehouse this page. So these are all the students of this particular counselor. So right off the bat, she can look at absences right here. And so if I just do a quick glance, right now she has 8 students that have 26 or more days of absence. Hopefully she and the deans are aware of these students, but if not, I can just click on it and get a list of who those kids are. Again, we were trying to be proactive. At this point, it's almost reactive because we just got the page up and running, but moving forward, if we're checking this on a daily, weekly basis, hopefully we can head some of those things off. Here's my average SAT score. So there's a separate report.
Turn it, I'm having a hard time seeing the numbers.
Oh, here. You know what? I'll blow it up too, and let me put that
Or
screen.
can we, light?
Yeah.
Turn the light off. That helps. There you go. Okay, that helps.
Sorry. I'm standing right next to it.
Blind and
Okay. There we go.
let there be. Yeah.
So, where was it? Right now, on average, this counselor has a 94.8% attendance rate for all the kids on her caseload, which is really good. She's right at that 95%.
What's a typical caseload about?
Right around 300, maybe 280
Okay.
per counselor. Depends on the building.
Well, I guess 8 doesn't look so bad, but.
No, not at all. Not at all. So again, where we want to look at, because this group is starting to encroach on that 18-day mark, it's these 30 students that potentially are going to be chronic absence. We can also get a snapshot of student infractions and suspensions. So right now she's got 13 students with 1 to 5 suspensions. So another opportunity for the counselor to get involved and to have conversations. Got a quick snapshot of her seniors. They scored a 433 in math and a 435 in reading and writing. We have a separate report where the counselor can actually pull the SAT or PSAT scores for the students on their caseload. Okay, so this report won't allow that at this point. Let me scroll down. So the last thing, which is not populating right now, we're having some issue with our IP address and our nightly load, but let me just back out a little bit. So when it does connect, it will actually give her the percentage of students earning A's through E's in the core classes. So English shows up here, math, science, social studies, so any students that have E's, she can click on it and see which students, which class, which teacher, and try to resolve some issues right away. So that's how we're trying to start. We're starting to wrap our head around collecting data, staying on top of it, divvying up the load. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Questions, comments, reflections? Go ahead.
The weighted added, that's grades over there?
It is.
6.9, okay.
Yes. This one I tell the counselors don't use the warehouse for GPA because it's not 100% accurate, because weighted grades are actually determined on the fly. So if you went into your counselor and say, can you produce me a transcript today, your class rank, your weight would be different as opposed to pulling it tomorrow, because more grades are being added in the system.
Oh, okay.
So that's where this is misleading. It's really hard to pull GPA into the warehouse because weighted grades are never stored. That's why I told them don't necessarily look at that one.
Okay. So that decision aid is working
Yes.
wonders again.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do this without it. Really, seriously.
But there's still all the rest of that college and career ready indicators, work program credit, community service. We don't know how to collect that at this point. I have to believe that PowerSchool eventually is going to come up with a reporting tool that we can just enter information, and once PowerSchool has it, then we can upload it into the warehouse. But that's the part that's going to be the most challenging. Any other comments, questions?
Is any of this going to be presented to the full board?
Well, that's something I wanted to ask you. Do you want me to do it as a committee of the whole?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay.
Yes.
They wanted me to ask
they
you that.
need to hear what we heard, because this is totally misleading, I think, without all
The explanation behind it?
with us.
Sure. Okay. I will talk to Dr. Kendall and see when we want to set that up.
Yeah.
Sometime, it doesn't have to be now, right? Sometime before the next, when would the scores come out for this year's SAT?
Well, in theory, we should have them by May. So maybe it's a good summer committee of the whole,
Yeah.
or maybe at a summer board meeting, since we don't have the student presentations, that we
might
just do a
be
regular
yeah.
board meeting presentation.
Yeah, that
Okay.
would work.
Yeah, I'll need some time to collate the new scores, but
Yeah.
they've been really good about getting them out. So in theory, we should have them back in May.
I think it's just frustrating to know they're talking about changing the time.
Yes.
It's like every year. How do you get anywhere? How do you get any consistency?
Yes. It is maddening.
Well,
I know it's a lot to digest, but the more we talk about it, look at it, go back to it, the easier it'll be to grasp, because it's a lot. And like I said, I'm still trying to understand that whole graduation rate formula. No one can give me the shortened version.
The only I've read some stuff where it's based on a federal diagnosis of what constitutes a graduate and how you. I didn't understand it when I read it, but
Yeah.
How do they compensate for? It seems to me that if you live in a more transient area, your graduation rate's going to drop.
Yes.
Just because
true.
you might still have 400 kids in the class, but it's not the same 400 kids.
Right.
And that's wrong.
I know it's hard for you to see, but this is basically the flow chart of how to come up with the adjusted cohort rate. So it talks about first time ninth graders, there was 100. Then we had 10 dropouts, and then we had 15 transfers out, and then we had 20 transfers in. So then we add all that. Now we're up to 105 students. This is where it's really, so yeah.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't.
Well, give us all of that information when the committee of the whole, and because then they can see that the job isn't really being done. And
What do you mean?
I'm just looking at it from when we go to an election, how people look at stuff in the wrong way that don't really understand. Because I mean, you know, even listening to it right now, you know, being educated on how stuff really works. So
You're saying people could misinterpret it and use
Yes.
it for the negative reasons.
Mhm.
Yeah, as opposed to,
They do.
we are making gains. We are. It is just frustrating, Evan, like you said, they're constantly changing the rules, and we're still trying to play catch up.
Well, and and it takes time to train the staff for
Yes.
what's, I think what we're doing with math is a fabulous idea. And I
Yes.
think we're going to see gains there because it just educationally, it makes sense. My brother-in-law is a retired math teacher, and we had a long discussion about this, and he said that in his understanding, it was basically put together that way. I was like, why did you do algebra, geometry, algebra 2?
Yes.
He said
Forever.
because you had to have algebra 2 to take the ACT test. And they wanted you to have it right before you took the test.
In that sense, it makes perfect sense.
It makes sense, but kids
From a kid perspective,
Right. No, if you
not-
do algebra and then you go to geometry, it's like apples and
language,
oranges. There's
yes.
very little correlation. And then you go back to algebra 2 and you start over.
Yes.
So this constant recycling, it just makes sense. It's like you're always reviewing,
Yes. And I think how the assessments are structured will look more like an SAT type test than how we've traditionally been assessing them. More word problems, more explain your answer in your own words.
Well, and I tell you, the elementary schools they're real heavy. And that's the Common Core math that the parents hate
Yes.
and bitch about constantly because it's not the way we learned it.
Right.
We memorize things, They learn the multiplication tables by making arrays, the little boxes. It drives me crazy, but it makes sense because kids don't understand that multiplication is repeated groups of the same size. They don't get that at all. Have no concept of that.
No.
But they're getting it now.
Yes. Thanks.
I just looked at Valerie's in kindergarten. Her report card is about understanding addition and subtraction facts and being able to put blocks together to show them. That was on her report card
Wow.
as a.
Yeah, I'm looking at my nephew's work that he brings home, and it's nice to see under each math problem, they refer to the mathematical practice. This one's looking at reasoning, this one's looking at precision, and at least exposing parents and the students to those concepts.
And the parents they're going crazy.
Yeah.
This is insane. My second grader can't do multiplication. She doesn't even know she's doing multiplication.
Exactly. But we're developing the reasoning skills, and that's half the battle.
Yep.
What time do we have, sir?
7:29.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned at 7:29. There are no announcements.